man. 20's gonna feel good.
Yeah.
We're gonna get a little more snow for you to shovel tomorrow.
Supposed to be 50 by
Hopefully
Wednesday.
so.
Yeah. Stacy, none of the sounds coming through.
Well, we have a quorum.
Yeah, we still got a few more minutes.
Well, it's 7 o'clock. Let's call this meeting to order. City of North Kansas City, Missouri, regular council meeting and motion to close part of the meeting, February 16th, 2021. Call a roll.
Councilmember Farr?
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong?
Yes.
Councilmember Saper?
Here.
Councilmember Smith? Councilmember Tull?
Here.
Councilmember Clevenger?
Here.
Councilmember Stewart?
Here.
Councilmember Clark?
Here.
Thank you. May I ask Councilmember Farr to lead everyone in the Pledge of Allegiance with all others remaining silent?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The next item is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Councilmember Farr?
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong?
Yes.
Councilmember Saper?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith still not on. Councilmember Tull?
Yes.
Councilmember Clevenger?
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart?
Yes.
Councilmember Clark?
Yes.
7-0, motion carried.
Councilmember DeLong.
I don't know if Councilmember Smith got a hold of you, but he had an issue at a rental house with a pipe busting. So he wasn't sure at what point he's going to be here.
Thank you. We hadn't heard that, but thank you for that report.
Yeah, he had just called me maybe 20 minutes ago to tell me that.
Thank you. Next item is comments from the public. Ms. Nakahoto, is there anyone from the public who would like to speak to the council tonight?
If there's anybody that would like to address the council, please use the raise hand feature or dial *9 by phone. Mr. Berlin, David Johnson would like to talk. Mr. Johnson, please unmute and go ahead and address the city council.
Good evening, all. David Johnson at Axis Properties. I know you guys have in front of you 2 or 3 items with respect to the parking over by Restless Spirits, Chicken and Pickle, and so forth. I just want to lend my applause to everybody here working so hard through what was an issue that I called you guys on a couple months ago upset about. I want to especially praise Tom Barcy for working hard to come to a solution. I know there's a lot of moving parts here. Once I became convinced a month or so ago, it was going in what I believe to be a good direction. I've kind of disengaged. I know there's a lot still to be done on this. I just want to say how important I think it is and how much I appreciate your efforts toward it. And although not a perfect solution, and I'm not thrilled how we got here, I think we made the best we could of the situation on it. And I hope you can get it done on it with whatever fine tuning that you guys think is needed. But the solution of them taking all the building and creating more parking, again, not perfect because of visual signs and other stuff, I think it'll be very good for the city. And I want to thank everybody for putting up with my input, which always comes at a rapid pace, and listening to others. So hope you can work through that. It's very important. But you've done a good job. And again, thank Tom Barcy for keeping me informed and working hard. I'm sure others did it, but Tom was a guy that really did a good job of keeping me up. Thank you.
There is a phone caller with 816-769-5507 that has indicated they would like to speak. I will unmute you at this time. I would ask that you identify yourself. So please take yourself off of mute and identify yourself.
Good evening, all. It's Richard Lanning, president of NKC Realty and over 60 affiliated companies. I'd like to offer my comments as well on behalf of our company. We'd like to commend the city on its efforts to secure this parking agreement with the 18th and Swift developer and the Miller family to create over 300 parking spaces for joint use. We really believe it's important to have a vibrant downtown district with abundant parking for all downtown businesses and their customers. We feel so strongly that parking is vital to the sustainability of the downtown that we entered into a license agreement with the city to keep our 18th and Swift parking lot open to the general public after hours and on the weekends. So again, thank you for being proactive in addressing this important issue, and we look forward to a successful development that maintains public access for all.
If there are any other speakers that would like to address the city council at this time, please use the raise hand feature or *9 on your mobile phone. Mr. Berlin, I am not seeing anybody that is indicating that they would like to speak at this time.
All right, thank you. That concludes comments from the public. The next item on the council's agenda is the consent agenda, comprised of approval of the minutes of the regular council meeting of February 2nd, appointment of James Daniel Trotter to the Equity and Inclusion Committee, and a short-term conditional use permit for ProPrint Digital.
So moved.
Question?
Second.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, number 7, is that addition or somebody been replaced already?
Mr. Francis Rodriguez was the original appointment of Councilmember Smith to the Equity and Inclusion Committee, but he declined before the first meeting of that committee. He resigned or declined to participate. So Mr. Trotter is now Mr. Smith's nominee.
Okay, thank you. That's second the motion.
Councilmember Farr,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong,
Yes.
Councilmember Saper.
Yes.
I must be, well, I think I'm dragging. Councilmember Smith,
I do not know what we're voting on.
This is the consent agenda.
we're voting on the we're voting on the consent agenda.
Yes.
Councilmember Toll,
Yes.
Councilmember Clevenger,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart,
Yes.
and Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
I'm dragging. North Kansas City Hospital COVID-19 report.
Thank you. I think City Clerk's internet might be a little slow tonight. We'll be prepared if she runs into problems. North Kansas City Hospital has provided a report on the current hospital situation in response to COVID-19. That's in your packet.
Number 10, XL2 Chapter 100 Bond Issuance Request Resolution of Intent, Resolution number 21-010. Am I any better now or am I still dragging?
You got a little bit better there towards the end. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, you're sounding good now. I will, for this item number 10, I will call on the city's financial advisor from Stifel, Matt Webster.
Good evening, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay? Good.
Yes.
This item is a follow-up to an identical item that we had on our agenda a couple of weeks ago. Since we last met, in compliance with the city's economic development policy, the applicant, XL2, met with the school district. The school district was unqualifiedly in support of this. They had nothing but good things to say. Just to reiterate, the proposal that XL has made is for an incentive less than the economic development policy of the city. So it's a fairly modest incentive request for a period of 10 years. We didn't want to delve too far into the numbers. Last time they gave, I thought a detailed report on what they were trying to do, and just to summarize, XL2 has a new product line that they are considering building in North Kansas City. They're also looking at other sites, and in consideration for locating the new plant in North Kansas City, they were asking for the abatement to cover some of the upfront costs, which are substantial for the production line. So we went and talked to the school district. As I said, they were in support. Had no suggestions for any changes or alterations to the abatement. I've also attached to the memo that I circulated a kind of a one-page summary of the numbers, and I'd just like to go over it briefly. Kim, if you could just put that slide up. Like all spreadsheets, it's difficult to follow. I won't go through every part of it. Starting from the top, current taxes, existing land and improvement. There is a building on the site which will remain. There was another building on the site which was demolished, and the site of the demolished building will be the site of the new building. So in order to not lose any tax revenue, there will be a pilot associated with the current building and the land on that building rests on. That's about $50,000 a year, and after 10 years increases to about $55,000. So the city, the school district, the other taxing jurisdictions will be made whole there. The new development, which is kind of the second part of the slide, talks about the new building, which is estimated to cost $5 million, and then the new equipment, which is about $1.5 million, for a total of $6.5 million. And we've calculated sort of what the taxes are on that, and then the request is for an abatement of 50% of that amount. So 50% of the taxes go away. The other 50% go to the taxing jurisdictions, and that's about 65% to the school district, about 11% to the city, about 17% to the state, and then the miscellaneous taxing jurisdictions are the other 8%. So I guess to summarize, what you're seeing here is in exchange for the abatement, the property will generate about 76,000, going up to about 86,000 in additional taxes, even with the abatement. And if the project did not go forward and there was no project, obviously that number would be zero. So I think that's an attractive proposition for the taxing jurisdictions. And then at the end of the 10 years, the abatement goes away and all the property returns to the tax rolls, where it will be assessed by the county assessor at full market value. And thereafter, they will pay property tax. There's another component to this, which I mentioned last time, and that is an exemption from sales taxes for the materials. I don't have a detailed number on the construction materials, but on a $5 million project, I think you could estimate between 40 and 50% of the total budget might be construction materials, and so that would yield a savings of about 150 to 185,000 to the applicant, and that's again within the city's policy. And finally, I'd like to point out something that we didn't mention last time, but through our review with XL2, there's also approximately $1.5 million of equipment that will be installed in the building, which is not subject to abatement. So there will be additional equipment that will be on the tax rolls and is not being abated. And so again, that is a win for the city and the taxing jurisdictions. Should you choose to adopt this resolution tonight, the city will work with outside bond counsel to prepare a Chapter 100 plan. That plan will be mailed to the taxing jurisdictions. There's a 20-day notice period associated with that plan. And after the 20-day notice period, the applicant will be back before the city council for formal approval of the Chapter 100 plan. And at that point, they can move forward with the financing and begin construction of the project. With that, I'll open it up to any questions or any additional information that you might want.
Councilmember Safer, and then Councilmember DeLong.
I support this plan, but the question I have is SPS, you said they had been considering other sites. When will their decision be made on this site?
They are on the call tonight. I don't know the answer to that, but I would invite their executives to answer that question directly.
Yeah, this is Dirk Daveline, the CFO for SPS Companies. We have a board meeting this Friday. So the hope is we'll report on the outcome of this at that board meeting. The board meeting, if this is positive tonight, then again, that should yield us in a position where our board would formally approve on Friday the decision to move forward with the location here, under the belief that, you know, it's just a formality that the other taxing jurisdictions, one of which we've already talked to in the school, and within the school, they're going to work closely with XL2, and we're going to try to create more learning opportunities for some of the students and teachers at the school.
They were actually at XL2 today discussing that program, so we're in full support of that.
Councilmember DeLong.
I know we hit on a lot of these last time, but someone missed last meeting and it's just tuning in this meeting. Looking at this is going to generate more property tax even with the abatement than the lot currently does, correct?
That is correct. That all of the new development is captured and abated for a period of years, but that's all new money to the city and all the other tax jurisdictions.
Okay, and then this one's for XL too, but could you remind me how many jobs come with this as well?
The initial phase will be about 10 to 11 jobs. We're still identifying how many people will be at each workstation. That's the first phase. The second phase will be a large amount of jobs. So about 20 people.
No, perfect. Thanks for going over that again. That's all I have.
Any other questions or discussion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Councilmember Farr,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong,
Yes.
Councilmember Saper,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Toll,
I'm happy to vote yes.
Councilmember Clevenger,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart,
Yes.
and Councilmember Clark.
Absolutely.
8-0, motion carried. Next item, number 11, renewal of service contract with Kansas City Area Transit Authority, fixed route and flex service. Bill number 7576, ordinance number 9373.
Thank you. I'll call on the Assistant City Administrator, Kim Nakahota.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you today is a 6-month agreement for transportation services with the KCATA. This 6-month contract is a little bit north of $150,000, and the cost is broken down in the memo attached, with the flex rate being 82% of that and the fixed route being 18%. I do have Don Bolden with KCATA, who is on the call with us, should you have any questions about our contract.
Councilmember Smith.
I looked through the stuff we had attached. I didn't see any ridership numbers for the flex. Do we have those figures?
Mr. Bolin, can you please address that?
Yeah, good evening. I apologize, Councilman. I did not include that in the submittal of the contract, but I can get that information to you, or I can present it to you now.
Do you have it handy?
I have the rough estimates. You're looking at about anywhere between 30 to 40 trips per day on your flex route.
And that's current usage during COVID, or is that previous?
That is current usage during COVID.
Okay. And I also, thank you for that. I also noticed that this is a 6-month contract running January 1, 2021 through June 30, 2021. So I can't help but notice we're middle of February. Is this contract already in place, or is it just covering a period of time that predates this meeting?
It would be covering a period of time that predates this meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember DeLong and then Councilmember Clevenger.
Yeah, I thought we switched the 6 months contract while you guys are currently reevaluating service as a whole. Where are you on that project? And is there a timeline on when there may be some results when we go back to a yearly contract, or is that a thing of the past now?
No, Councilman DeLong, that is something that we're still are looking to work with Kim and staff on producing for you in the next contract round.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Clevenger and then Councilmember Smith.
Are we, as far as the bus routes, are they charging for the ridership now? I know it was free at one point during COVID. Is it still free, or are they charging now?
It is still currently free fare, or fare zero, that's being supported through the CARES Funding Act.
Okay. And like Councilman Smith said, you know, these are great. Contract is reduced 25%, obviously, because of the ridership. You know, I think eventually we do need to talk about the flex and what we do with that and how we adapt that. But I'm in favor of the contract going forward.
Thank you, sir.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes, so I was asking about that, and I had a time to scratch out some rough numbers on a piece of paper here. It looks like at this rate, with the ridership that's projected, we're looking at $18 to $23 per ride. It just seems really high for us to be paying that much on a projection of ridership. We could effectively, pay for Ubers or Lyfts to anywhere in the city for that number. This has been a constant thing we've discussed is what do we do with the flex? And, it's one of those things that it's just become so expensive per ride. I don't know if the council is now the time to have that discussion, whether we continue with it. It just seems like a really expensive per ride situation.
I don't disagree with you, sir. We don't have an alternative before you tonight. So if you were not to proceed with it there at this time, there wouldn't be an alternative for those 30 to 40 riders who are using the service. We as we mentioned when we proposed the budget to you, it is an issue, and it is something that we have told to ATA we'd like to explore with them, and we can explore our own solutions. But we don't have an alternative before you tonight.
Are there, KCATA on the call, are there alternatives to the flex that would be less costly per ride?
Actually, that is something that we are exploring right now. There are options that we need to have further discussion on with staff that before we bring them to you.
Is there a way we can, the contract's already predates this meeting. Could we forge ahead for another couple weeks or a month before approving a 6-month contract to see those alternatives?
I'm going to leave that one to staff. I apologize.
Yeah, I guess, sir, I'm not confident we would be able to bring an alternative to you in a month or two, in all honesty.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councilmember Clevenger.
As I said before, I think we do need to have sincere discussions about the flex and maybe partnering with someone else or what have you for reducing the amount of the ride, because Jesse's right, it's always been high. I think right now, and especially during the COVID, we need to at least go this 6 months. But I think it is important that staff bring something to us that maybe some other possible alternatives. We've talked about it before to see about the flex. And the good thing about this is that it's a 6-month contract. Maybe we can have some other solutions by June. So.
Councilmember DeLong and then Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, I agree with what pretty much everyone said so far. We need to have that conversation. Do you have any idea when we may be able to have that conversation?
Well, we need to first have our discussion with KCATA. So I don't want to give you a date that we might miss. So we do understand the urgency of it, and we'll bring this to you for discussion as soon as we can.
And so certainly I believe this is an important service to a lot of our residents, as they're using it to get back and forth from, I know they're like the gardens of the hospital. And some of my neighbors on my street, I've seen use it before. Certainly, an important mobility service here for them. So I'd definitely be in favor of keeping it now. Don't want to lose it now until we come up with some alternatives.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, I think something to keep in mind when you start talking about replacing it, or if it's possible, is Uber and places and taxis and things are not set up for the handicap. The flex, they can take people in wheelchairs and lifts and all that. So you're going to have to take that in consideration when you start talking about replacing it.
Councilmember DeLong.
I would add to that, maybe I'll use the wrong term here, but I was on a meeting the other day talking about some of these like mobility as a service companies and new technologies connecting with cell phones and connecting with other technology keep coming out. And that was one of the things that was a downfall in other cities was, you go to a new service, how do you make sure you still service that same group of people? So they are coming out with more, ADA, other type of transportation, but I guess we'll have to see what's available here in the area. Thank you.
Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, I agree not cutting out the service without any sort of warning. That would be pretty rough for people who depend on it. But we've said this for as long as I've been on the council, hey, we need to take a hard look at the flex, and we haven't really taken a hard look at the flex. I had a train of thought with that one. I mean, I don't know what the alternatives look like exactly. I mean, obviously we need to keep the bus service, like the regular fixed ride service. So I would support going forward this. I would like to see if we could get, after this meeting, the actual ridership data for the last 6 months, going back to the previous contract renewal, to see what the actual ridership looks like. Are we counting those 30? Is that, each direction of a two-way trip? What does that look like? And if we've got route data, who's using it and how, we could possibly think of some alternatives there. So thanks.
First reading.
Second.
Councilmember Farr,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong,
Yes.
Councilmember Saper,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Tull,
Yes.
Councilmember Clevenger,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart,
Yes.
and Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
8-0, motion carried. An ordinance adopting and approving a contract by and between the City of North Kansas City, Missouri and the Kansas City Area Transportation Authority for public transportation services within the City of North Kansas City, Missouri.
I move the bill number 7576 be placed on second and final reading and passes ordinance number 9373.
Second.
Councilmember Farr,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong,
Yes.
Councilmember Saper,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Tull,
Yes.
Councilmember Clevenger,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
8-0, motion carried. An ordinance adopting and approving a contract by and between the City of North Kansas City, Missouri and the Kansas City Area Transportation Authority for public transportation services within the City of North Kansas City, Missouri. Item 12, parking development agreement and reciprocal easements agreement with Store Safe 4 LLC, bill number 7578, ordinance number 9375.
Thank you. So before, with regard to item 12, staff would say really items 12 through 16, the next 5 items on your agenda, are really all tied together. And so our suggestion would be, and I'm sure you noticed, the cover memo for all 5 items is the same. We tried to summarize basically all 5 of them in this one document. So what I'd like to do is briefly go through all 5 items, and then our suggestion would be that you have any discussion about the entire transaction about at the same time, because as we say, for example, to pass 4 of them but not a 5th wouldn't really work. So our thought would be that you have whatever questions and discussion about any of these items at the same time. So with that, I will do a brief summary. So the city and 18th and Swift LLC have been working to implement a revised parking agreement that'll swap the city's 87 spaces of ground floor structured parking for approximately 143 spaces on the surface lot to the west of the Store Safe building between Swift and Clay and north of West 16th Avenue. The developer acquired the parking lot from an adjacent property owner and from the BNSF Railroad, and made an offer to transfer that property to the city in exchange for exchanging the 87 spaces within the developer's parking structure. So the net result of this transaction would result in the city foregoing a $600,000 payment for public parking shared cost, also foregoing a $750,000 payment to the developer for parking and infrastructure related cost, which was secured by a community improvement district that the council approved. That CID would be terminated, and we would bring that item, the termination of the CID, to you at a future meeting. The city would purchase the surface parking lot from the developer for $1. The city would be responsible for a demolition of the building that's on that property and construction related to the surface parking lot. In addition to the transaction with the developer, the parking agreement involves a property swap with StoreSafe 4, who owns the adjacent StoreSafe building. The city and StoreSafe 4 would jointly construct a lot with about 300 spaces, and the ownership of the lot would be divided between the city and StoreSafe. And the new city parking would have direct access onto both West 18th and West 16th Avenue, as well as Swift Street. It would also be constructed pursuant to the parking development agreement and the reciprocal easement agreement, and the city and StoreSafe would separately own their respective parking lots. So we do have these 5 items before you. The first being an ordinance approving the parking development agreement and reciprocal easements agreement between the city and StoreSafe relating to the development and the ownership and mutual use of the new parking. It would implement the land swaps between StoreSafe and the city, and the agreement details construction of the new city parking lot. The reciprocal easements agreement creates mutual rights of use between the city parking parcel and the StoreSafe parcel for operation of the surface parking lot. Each party would have rights of access to the parking lots. The next item, the second item before you related to this, is an agreement of purchase and sale between the developer and the city. This property was formerly owned by George Westello and the BNSF Railroad. The city would purchase for $1, and the purchase would be conditioned on an agreement between the city and StoreSafe relating to the development of the surface parking, which I just discussed. The agreement includes a 3-story height restriction on the portion of the land to be retained by the city. The third item related to this on your agenda is an ordinance approving the second amended and restated development agreement between the developer and the city. That agreement implements the trade of the structured parking for the surface parking, eliminates the city requirement for the $600,000 payment and the $750,000 payment, which was secured by a community improvement district, which would be terminated at a future meeting. The fourth item is approving an omnibus amendment of documents relating to the city's Series 2020 Chapter 100 bonds. Because the city would no longer own the structured parking, the Chapter 100 bonds need to be amended to reflect the transfer of such ownership to the developer. This accomplishes the transfer of the structured parking to the developer. It's also a cleanup amendment necessitated by the financing related to the developer's private lender. It has no financial impact on the city. And then fifthly, before you is an ordinance approving a termination of the parking structure maintenance agreement. Because the city would no longer have any structured parking spaces, the city and developer would execute the termination agreement, and then after closing, the ownership, costs, and maintenance of the parking structure would solely be a developer responsibility. So those are the 5 items before you, all tied together related to this transaction. Are there any questions or comments? Councilmember Tall.
I sent out some comments, not for discussion, but for people to see. I wanted to make sure everybody saw the building that we would be tearing down, the brick building. You haven't been inside. I asked Eric, they haven't been inside to see the condition of the building, just the just looking at possible hazards that might be there. But it looks like a really decent building. And I was thinking if we could save the storefront piece of that, when you drove down 16th Street, you wouldn't see just 2 solid blocks of pavement from 16th all the way up to 18th. And you would be able to use that building without giving up a ton of parking spaces. So we're talking about going from 87 garage parking spaces right on 18th and Swift to a strip of parking spaces, which are more, but it goes from 18th all the way down, or all the way up to 16th down. I'm thinking down, but I just wanted to have a discussion about it. One of the things I take issue with is that we've spent weeks and weeks and weeks working on this behind the scenes, and then it doesn't get published publicly until end of day Friday. And we make a decision on Tuesday. It was a holiday on Monday. So to be able to talk to other business people that are right on 18th and Swift to get their thoughts on more parking versus location of parking, it makes that very difficult. And I just feel like without discussing contracts or changing land or anything like that, we could have had a public discussion about this with the businesses and with the community as to what the preferences were. So I just really wanted to make sure that everybody saw this building that would be torn down. I really think part of that is, I mean, it would be able to be saved and used and still produce enough parking to make both parties happy. The BNSF strip that's there could be paved as a drive-through, and we could stripe it however StoreSafe wanted it. So really, I just wanted us to discuss it before it was a rubber stamp. Thank you.
Councilmember Stewart and then Councilmember DeLong.
Yeah, I think after all the work, it's kind of late to bring up something like this. And I think we heard a couple of business people what they think about the parking. But also, you know, you don't want the city to turn into a landlord. We tried this with the community center. It failed under our leadership. We did that on the internet. It failed under our leadership, and we had to give it to a public entity to run. The city, you know, we got no business to be in the rental business. I read your thing, and you know, you're talking about a storefront with us owning the building and being landlords. And we're intruding again on private industry by becoming landlords. I just don't think it's a good idea at all. I like the original plan we got to go through and not to rehash this every meeting.
Councilmember DeLong.
I know this is our first public meeting on this, though, so it's the first time anyone else has had any access to anything we're talking about. So this is the public's very first time seeing this. Second of all, when you tear down the building, you lose the taxes that come with the building. So how would a parking lot be taxed? Significantly less. First question for staff on this. It appears via the Clay County Collector's website that taxes haven't been paid on this Costello building yet. Do you know how that works if the city takes over that building when those taxes haven't been paid yet? Or, you know, the website could be behind, but it's still showing property taxes due on the site.
I guess, I don't know if Mr. Webster has any thoughts. I mean, any taxes that have been due should be paid. Of course, once it becomes public property, no longer would property taxes.
That was yeah, well, okay. So leading into where my question was going is that would be one of my concerns is if we take this over before this $30,000 bill is paid, what happens?
So again, this is Matt Webster. If taxes are due, you know, it's currently under private ownership, those taxes need to be paid. In my experience, and by the way, those taxes would have been due December 31st, so it could be a reporting issue.
It shows interest and penalties too.
But in any case, the city would not be responsible for those taxes, and they wouldn't be abated because they relate to 2020, not 2021. But the city administrator is correct. Once title moves over to the city, at that point, it would be tax exempt, and there would be no taxes due on December 31 of 2021 because it's owned by the city at that point.
Yeah, no, I get that. I just want to make sure that, you know, these taxing jurisdictions aren't losing out on this if we take it over. So you're saying it'd still be the responsibility of the current owner now to rectify that the taxes from 2020.
Yes.
Okay. So then, you know, in touching on that property, as Lisa broke it up, I would not advocate for the city continuing to own it and rent it. I'd sell the thing so you get it back in private ownership for this exact reason, for the taxes. But my biggest issue really with this on this agreement is the plowing. And we've talked about this, so you know I'm going to touch on this, is, you know, we're including plowing for both the public and private side, which I'm fine with, but we're not asking for any sort of, you know, payment towards that. And if I recall correctly, we still actually even charge our Parks and Recreation for some of the stuff Municipal Works does for them. So I don't know, and I could be wrong on that, but I don't know how you didn't turn around and plow a private lot for no charge. That's still in the contract, right? To plow the entire lot.
Mr. Barzee.
Yes, it is. It's still in there. Do remember this, Mr. Halver's on this. When I had a conversation with him, he said it'd be easier for our guys to plow the whole thing than to try to plow part of a parking lot.
I don't disagree with that. I'm 100% on board with that. But I think if you're doing work on private property, that should be compensated in some way. That would be the amendment I would want to see in this. Lisa already touched on, I mean, the way this property line is drawn prevents any future development from ever happening here, locking us into a public parking lot forever. And then two more. One, the link of the contract, and I don't have it up, so I'm trying to think about it. Well, can this contract be canceled at any time? Referring to the first one we're looking at here, the shared parking lot agreement.
Yes, I believe it's 120 days notice.
Yeah, so I mean, we could have I mean, this could be gone just like that too, given the notice, of course. Okay, and then the last thing I'll just conclude with this is, I have a hard time seeing the demand for 300 parking spaces right here. I just don't see it. The uses are at different times. There's got to be some sort of middle ground here, and I think this kind of goes into where Lisa was, looking at that building. I just don't see the need for 300. And I think agreeing to this greatly diminishes any argument that we made in regards to walkability, bikeability, multimodal transit. We were talking streetcar. Approving this really kind of spits in the face of doing that. You take this lot here and overbuild it for 300 cars, and it just, I don't see the parking demand here, the 300, because we see the paid parking lot often empty. We have the deal with NT. There is a need for parking here. I don't believe it's a need for 300 spaces though. Thank you.
Councilmember Stewart and then Councilmember Clevenger.
Yeah, the parking you don't see used very much because of charge. No, I don't think we're going to charge for parking. And remember, when you mentioned it later when you was talking that if we save the building and we own it, you're going to lose taxes on it anyway because we don't pay taxes. And the reason we charge the park department for plowing or whatever is because they have their own tax. If they didn't have their own tax, we'd do it for free, like we do every other public place.
Councilmember Clevenger and then Councilmember DeLong.
So you're talking about the building. Does anyone know, or do we know what kind of shape the building is in, first of all? Before you even talk about keeping the building, do we know what kind of shape the building is in? Public Works, staff?
We have not tried to assess the condition of the building. No, sir.
Okay. Now we've also got to look at this area too. And right now, maybe 200 and some odd spaces may be fine. But, in the future, if we get more development in that area, somewhere around maybe the bowling alley or some other in that area, we may need more spaces. This is a fix that's going to give us ample parking. We won't have to worry about the 87 parking spaces in the garage and keeping people out of that. So I'm in favor of just moving this forward.
Councilmember DeLong and then Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, I guess my only follow-up question to the plowing. Does the city currently do any other work on privately owned lots?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Smith.
So in listening to what everybody said here, I do agree that the timing and the lack of public visibility to this is awkward. The whole thing from start to finish has been kind of a stumble until we figure out where we're going. And each time we've butted up against a deadline where if this doesn't get approved now, the construction doesn't start, everything kind of the whole ball unwinds. And that's a really unfortunate situation because I do think there's merit to Lisa's idea. I just think that at this point, we're so far down a path. We've said this each time that we come to a decision point. We are so far down this path that we need to forge the agreements we have and get this off the ground. Now, Bryant mentioned that he said it would lock it as a public parking lot forever. I don't know that that's the case. Once we own this land, if we see that there's not demand for 300 space, or if the area doesn't develop as we expect, we still own the property. We could have it develop. We could sell a part off. We could do an RFP on a chunk of it, just like we did the parking lot that is at 18th and Swift. So it doesn't lock it forever. I see that tearing a building down only to maybe later build one again is a weird play. But I think Zach makes a good point that, we don't know what the needs of parking are going to be going forward. And right now, one of the very biggest issues facing North Kansas City is, where do we park? It's very difficult right now to find a spot. So I support this, but I do see merit in what you're bringing to us, Lisa. And I wish we'd had, a cleaner timeline to get this to public input. So yeah, I support the agreement that's on the table right now.
Councilmember Farr, and then Councilmember DeLong, and then Councilmember Tull.
Eric, refresh me, the parking lot behind, next to the church and the one behind the movie theater, they're both privately owned that we lease. Don't we plow those?
Yes, sir. But because we lease them, they're sort of semi-public property. I mean, we pay to use them. So yes, we do take care of those when there's an issue. Councilmember DeLong.
So, just to follow on what Jesse said, looking at this property line, I don't know how you'd really develop on either side. This is running, unless I'm looking at the wrong document here, it's running north-south. So I'm not sure what the width exactly is between buildings there that we could possibly develop something. And then for staff, at one point, this has an estimate on this document of $500,000. Is that all of the work, demolition, construction? I guess that'd be it, demolition, construction of this entire area.
Yes, sir, that's our estimate.
Okay, because at one point there was another 300 attached on a memo. So I wasn't sure if that still applied, if we're looking at 500 or potentially 800. But,
we were estimating $400,000 for our share of the parking construction, for the parking construction, and $100,000 for the demolition.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Tull.
Last thing I'll say about this. We're trading 87 garage spaces, which was down from the 124 or whatever it was. And I wasn't on the council when they passed that, but it did pass. So trading that, which seems like planning for more modes of transportation is why they may feel confident in downsizing, trading that for a massive 2-block surface parking lot when we already had a fantastic parking lot, surface lot on 18th and Swift. I agree with a business owner that I said, why don't you just build the apartments on 16th Street? That would have made way more sense. So I do know, in the things that I've been a part of, when we change course, when we don't stand behind our decisions and move forward, it costs us so much more money than just choosing it to be that way in the beginning. And then that's it. We're ready for a vote.
Councilmember Saper.
Many residents, myself included, have long opposed this project. It's been a pretzel bending trip down a roller coaster of the various changes back and forth. And this discussion tonight reflects some of that in these things up for consideration. So as a matter of principle, I can't vote for any of it.
First reading.
Second.
Councilmember Farr?
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong?
No.
Councilmember Saper?
No.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Tull?
No.
Councilmember Clevenger?
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart?
Yes.
Councilmember Clark?
No.
We have a tie, 4-4.
Do I get to vote?
You do. You got to break the tie.
Yes.
Okay. An ordinance adopting and approving 1, parking development agreement, and 2, reciprocal easements agreement between Store Safe 4 LLC and the city of North Kansas City, Missouri regarding certain real property owned by Store Safe 4 LLC and the city of North Kansas City, Missouri, generally located north of 16th Avenue, east of Clay Street, south of 18th Avenue, and west of Swift in the city of North Kansas City, Missouri, and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute said documents on behalf of the city.
I move that bill number 7578 be placed on second and final reading and passes ordinance number 9375.
Second.
Second.
Councilmember Farr,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong,
No.
Councilmember Saper,
No.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Tull,
No.
Councilmember Clevenger,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark.
No.
We have a tie again.
Yes.
An ordinance adopting and approving 1, parking development agreement, and 2, reciprocal easements agreement between Store Safe 4 LLC and the city of North Kansas City, Missouri regarding certain real property owned by Store Safe 4 LLC and the city of North Kansas City, Missouri, generally located north of 16th Avenue, east of Clay Street, south of 18th Avenue, and west of Swift in the city of North Kansas City, Missouri, and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute said documents on behalf of the city. Item 13, purchase and sale agreement 18th and Swift, bill number 7579, ordinance number 9376.
First reading.
Second.
Councilmember Tull.
Can I ask a question? Since the first one passed, we need to pass the rest of them. Is this how it works? Like the first one's done, so would we be legally misstepping to vote against the next one since they all rely on the step before?
No, ma'am. No. If you oppose this, then you're perfectly within your rights to vote against.
Okay.
Just don't resolve the CID now.
Is there any further discussion?
Councilmember Farr,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong,
No.
Councilmember Saper,
No.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Tull,
No.
Councilmember Clevenger,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark.
No.
4-4 tie. Mayor Stilo.
Yes.
An ordinance adopting and approving agreement of purchase and sale between 18th and Swift LLC as seller and the city of North Kansas City, Missouri as purchaser for certain real property generally located at 200 East 16th Avenue in the city of North Kansas City, Missouri.
I move that bill number 7579 be placed on second and final reading and passes ordinance number 9376.
Second.
Councilmember Farr,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong,
No.
Councilmember Saper,
No.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Tull,
No.
Councilmember Clevenger,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark.
No.
We have a tie, Mayor.
Yes.
An ordinance adopting and approving agreement of purchase and sale between 18th and Swift LLC as seller and the city of North Kansas City, Missouri as purchaser for certain real property generally located at 200 East 16th Avenue in the city of North Kansas City, Missouri. Item 14, second amended and restated development agreement 18th and Swift, bill number 7580, ordinance number 9377.
First reading.
Second.
Councilmember Farr,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong,
Yes.
Councilmember Saper,
No.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Tull,
Yes.
Councilmember Clevenger,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
7-1, motion carried. An ordinance approving second amended and restated development agreement by and between the city of North Kansas City, Missouri and 18th and Swift LLC and authorizing the execution thereof on behalf of the city by the mayor.
I move that bill number 7580 be placed on second and final reading and passes ordinance number 9377.
Second.
Councilmember Farr,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong,
Yes.
Councilmember Saper,
No.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Toll,
Yes.
Councilmember Clevenger,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
7-1, motion carried. An ordinance approving second amended and restated development agreement by and between the city of North Kansas City, Missouri and 18th and Swift LLC and authorizing the execution thereof on behalf of the city by the mayor. Number 15, omnibus amendments to Chapter 100 bond documents. Bill number 7581, ordinance number 9378.
First reading.
Second.
Second.
Councilmember Farr,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong,
Yes.
Councilmember Saper,
No.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Toll,
Yes.
Councilmember Clevenger,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
7-1, motion carried. An ordinance approving an omnibus amendment of documents relating to the city's $47,250,000 aggregate maximum principal amount taxable industrial development revenue bonds, 18th and Swift project, Series 2020, and authorizing the execution of such amendment on behalf of the city by the mayor.
I move that bill number 7581 be placed on second and final reading and passes ordinance number 9378.
Second.
Councilmember Farr,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong,
Yes.
Councilmember Saper,
No.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Tull,
Yes.
Councilmember Clevenger,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
7-1, motion carried. An ordinance approving an omnibus amendment of documents relating to the city's $47,250,000 aggregate maximum principal amount taxable industrial development revenue bonds, 18th and Swift project, Series 2020, and authorizing the execution of such amendment on behalf of the city by the mayor. Item 16, termination of parking structure maintenance agreement. Bill number 7582, ordinance number 9379.
First reading.
Second.
Second.
Councilmember Farr,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong,
Yes.
Councilmember Saper,
No.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Tull,
Yes.
Councilmember Clevenger,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes, ma'am.
7-1, motion carried. An ordinance adopting and approving termination of parking structure maintenance agreement between the city of North Kansas City, Missouri and 18th and Swift LLC regarding the 18th and Swift development project.
I move that bill number 7582 be placed on second and final reading and passes ordinance number 9379.
Second.
Councilmember Farr,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong,
Yes.
Councilmember Saper,
No.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Tull,
Yes.
Councilmember Clevenger,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
7-1, motion carried. An ordinance adopting and approving termination of parking structure maintenance agreement between the city of North Kansas City, Missouri and 18th and Swift LLC regarding the 18th and Swift development project. Item 17, code modification request, 18th and Swift, resolution number 21-011.
Thank you. I'll call on the Community Development Director, Sarah Copeland.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. What is before you tonight is a site-specific code modification request. The city's adopted building codes include the National Electrical Code, and that code requires that for balconies, decks, and porches that are attached to a dwelling unit and accessible from inside that unit shall have at least one receptacle outlet or electrical outlet accessible from the balcony. The architect for the 18th and Swift project is planning balconies for those units with sliding doors that extend the full width of the balcony. So they've requested a code modification so that they are not required to include that electrical outlet. Staff has no concerns with approving this request, but it is before you for your approval. I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Councilmember Clevenger, and then Councilmember Stewart, and then Councilmember DeLong.
Yes. Well, first of all, on this, as an apartment dweller before, this seems like poor planning, poor architecture from the developer. You know, I understand that they may not want like electric grills and everything out on the patio or on the balconies. But the code, the international code, calls for an outlet to be out there. They did that for a reason. And I think that, you know, we've given a lot for this development to come in here, given a lot as a city. I'm not in favor of this code modification. I think that they need to find a way to include the outlets on the balcony.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, a couple things on it. You know, as a convenience, I don't care if they have an outlet or not. But, you know, people are going to sit out there that may need medical things, you know, handicapped people, and they need a plug-in for, you know, maybe an oxygen thing or something like that. So, and if they think not having a plug-in out there is going to stop people from grilling, they're you know, that's what they made extension cords for. Mm-hmm. So I don't want them cooking on it, don't get me wrong, but that's not going to stop them just by not having an outlet on the balcony itself. And I kind of agree with Zach. You know, it's in the code for a reason. And, you know, and people, you know, if I lived in an apartment, and I'd spend a lot of time on a balcony, and I would want to plug.
Councilmember DeLong, and then Councilmember Saper.
I'd agree with Councilmember Stewart and Clevenger, what they said. I mean, I don't want people to start using extension cords to achieve the same things that they're wanting to do on their balcony. And, you know, as this project came about, it was described, you know, I can't remember, all sorts of modifiers of fancy, you name it, it's been used. And then to get to the end and say there's not even going to be outlets on the balcony, I can't vote yes on this. Thank you.
Councilmember Saper.
I can only agree with the previous three council members that I don't want to see extension cords hanging out on the balcony. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Councilmember Tall.
I just wanted to say thank you to Councilmember Stewart for 2 times now, just bringing our attention to people that may need something due to a disability or a health reason. I fully agree with you.
Councilmember Clark.
Yeah, my mind has been completely flopped because I was kind of like, yeah, it doesn't directly affect me. They can really do whatever, but that's why we're all here, is to create perspective. So thanks.
Well, I guess
Councilmember Smith, I'm sorry.
Do we know, everybody said it's there in the code for a reason. Do we know what that reason is? Is Mr. Harris on the call?
I think Ms. Copeland's representing.
Yeah, Mr. Harris is not here tonight. So I could not say.
Okay, because, you know, I deal with code stuff fairly often in real estate and residential stuff. And some of the things that are in the code have been there just because they've been in the code for a long time. I looked at, you know, I'm looking at the mock-up here of the balcony and the sliding doors. I'm not sure where they're going to put that outlet unless they make some serious modifications to something they've already drawn up. It would be helpful to know why it's there, but we don't have that information, so I guess we'll vote on what we've got.
Actually, I can answer that question, I believe. Mr. Harris and I had that conversation, actually. I think this is what you're looking for, because it's actually part of the National Electrical Code itself that we adopt into our ordinance. And unless we modify it out in some way, it remains in our ordinance, and we update the code. And Sarah could help more, probably better than that, but every 3, 4, 5 years, we'll get an updated version of the different international codes. And that's what happened in this particular instance. And it's actually in, you can't see it, but I have a copy of the international code itself. And we go through it pretty thoroughly, but we did not, that was not one item that was removed out, Mr. Smith, when we redid it. And that was just a couple of years ago, I want to say, that we redid these things. Okay, I hope that helps a little, but that's where we are.
Councilmember Stewart and then Councilmember Clevenger.
Yeah, you know, it's still a parking lot, so the developers have plenty of time to narrow the width of that door. I mean, they hadn't even started building it yet. You know, I looked at the pictures, you know, that sliding glass, it's not all going to be, you know, it's going to be a solid part, and then the door moving part of the door. They could change the size of it before they built the thing. I can see if it was already built, you know, not wanting to change it.
Councilmember Clevenger.
My only question is if, I think everything's been said. If there's no motion to approve, then it just falls off the agenda, correct?
Well, that would be true. Yes. Okay. Councilmember Tall.
I can't tell from this picture because it looks like that it's not actually a balcony you walk out onto, but it is, right? Do you know the dimensions of the balcony?
I'm sorry, I don't know the dimensions of the balcony.
Okay.
I don't think they'd make it if you couldn't walk out.
It is a balcony that you could walk out onto, but I don't know the depth.
That's what I assume. Sometimes you see something that's like a Juliet, so you can open the door, but you can't actually walk out, in which case you wouldn't need an outlet. But I assumed that they can actually walk out. So I was just asking just to make sure I wasn't wrong.
So is there any more questions or discussion, or is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that can you just make a motion to vote on this?
Yes, sir. Usually if a motion's made, it's usually best to do it in the affirmative, and then if you're opposed, to vote against. Or as Mr. Clevenger indicated, you could, if there was no motion, then the item would simply move on for lack of action.
Yeah, I can't move it forward in a positive note. If anybody else wants to vote yes, then they can make the motion, I suppose.
Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, so I'm reading I pulled up the NEC while we've been discussing. There's an exception. Balconies, decks, or porches with a usable area of less than 20 square feet are not required to have receptacles installed. I'm not certain what version of the code, because those change quite often. Any indication on whether these are 20 square feet?
These are more than 20 square feet. That would not exclude these.
So it'd be required. The other part that I believe is changing the code is that it now can be outside the perimeter of the balcony as long as it's accessible from the balcony. So we may see them slapping outlets outside the balconies, which would be a little weird, but that's a possibility that we may encounter if we don't approve the exception.
Member Clevenger.
I say if we're going to make these luxury apartments, we're going to make them nice. Let's put an outlet on the balcony or somewhere close to. So let's make a decision on
it. Is there a motion? It appears the item fails for lack of a motion.
Item 18. Budget Amendment, Armour Road Complete Streets Project, Resolution number 21-007.
Thank you. I'll call on Ms. Copeland.
This item is pursuant to the direction the council provided at the meeting, at your last meeting, with regard to which projects to move forward in this year. You directed that we should include the intersection improvements at Armour and Howell in addition to the list of items from the previous work session. So these next two items are related in that the first one is the budget amendment to allow us to pay for the estimated costs of all of these items. And the second is the task order with WSP to provide for the plans that are needed for us to move forward. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Councilmember Clark.
I just wanted to point out, this is an example of a project that moved through city cooperation, absolute input, no executive sessions, everything out in the open, community voting, all of the things. And then it got pushed back after it was implemented. And now that's why we're at where we're at for this amendment. And I think that's why I had an issue with I know that's why I had an issue with the last, the 18th and Swift. I'm for the parking, but not for how it was dealt with. So I just wanted to point that out, that this is an example of something where we all pitched in on this. I wasn't on the council, of course, but we all pitched in on this. And then it's taken all this time and twists and turns and money and money and money. That's it.
I move to approve.
Second.
Councilmember Farr,
No, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong,
Yes.
Councilmember Saper,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Tull,
Yes.
Councilmember Clevenger,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart,
No.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
6-2, motion carried. Item 19, task order number 6 with WSP Engineers, Armour Road Complete Street Improvements, resolution number 21-008.
Thank you. I'll call on Ms. Copeland.
Again, this item is to direct us, our engineers for this project, WSP, to move forward with the plans that are necessary for these improvements. This would provide us with basic plans to be used by our municipal services crews for the projects that can be completed in-house, and bid plans for the items that need to be put out to bid. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Smith.
Quick question on the completion dates for rendering services. Some of these go out as far as July. Is there a reason for that sort of length of time? Or are they just backlogged, or these just take that long?
Well, task number 1 is just, all of the, project management things. Task number 5 is the item that takes the longest, and that's because it's just the most detailed, and they're kind of tackling these in order. So the easiest projects that we can complete in-house would be done first.
Okay. To kind of draw it up and then do it.
And I would also say that's like final completion. It's possible that they would be done sooner, but that's, as Tom says, you always put a term on everything. And so this would be the term for final completion of all the work.
Okay, thank you.
Move to approve resolution number 21-008.
Second.
Councilmember Farr,
No, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong,
Yes.
Councilmember Saper,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Tull,
Yes.
Councilmember Clevenger,
Those engineers make good money, but yes.
Councilmember Stewart,
No.
and Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
6-2, motion carried. Number 20, appointment of council members to streetcar work group.
Thank you. I'll call on Ms. Copeland.
So at your meeting on January 5th, you adopted a resolution supporting extension of the streetcar system through North Kansas City and directing us to discuss with the Streetcar Authority how we could move forward on that. Eric and I have had discussions with Tom Garrett, the executive director of the Streetcar Authority, about next steps. And we've identified 3 main next steps: reviewing the 2014 North Rail Extension Study, to discuss what changes have occurred in North Kansas City and in the Streetcar Authority since 2014, just reviewing the alternatives that were considered as part of that. This is something that we believe could be done with in-house staff, both the city staff and Streetcar Authority staff, and might help us to identify the path forward in the next step, which would be updating the cost and revenue projections that were part of that study. We've noted here that evaluating financial projections would definitely require outside expertise, and there is a cost range there. The Streetcar Authority and KCATA have committed to split this cost with us if we get to this point, so that we would each bear up to $50,000 of the cost of updating those cost and revenue projections. When we wrote this memo, it was still a potential, but Tom has indicated that they would definitely share those costs with us. And then the third major step would be completing an environmental assessment. Again, we see these as consecutive steps, not things that we would do all at once. And so we would only get to the environmental assessment step if the first two steps, convinced us that we were moving forward in a positive direction. And environmental assessment would be required for the project to be eligible to receive federal funds. So in the short term, what we need is to create a work group to help us start work on this. We thought it would be a good idea to have 3 council members join with Mr. Berlin and myself to compose the North Kansas City half of this work group. And that group could convene to begin work on the first step of reviewing the North Rail study. I'd be happy to answer any questions, but otherwise we look for direction from you on council members to join that group.
Councilmember Clevenger, and then Councilmember Tall.
I think the work group is important. I mean, one of the big questions is how you're going to pay for it, and if you can get some buy-in with other agencies. First of all, before you get to spending money, is to review the North Rail study that we had on 2014. I think it's important to use people that have used mass transit, and also people that have some planning experience. I know Councilmember DeLong was real important in bringing this forward. I use mass transit, used to before COVID every day going downtown. The streetcar would definitely, affect me if it came to fruition. So I'd like to, if there is a work group started, I'd like to at least throw my hat in the ring for that. But again, it's getting updated on the feasibility and the costs. And I know it's going to cost some money to look at that, but it's whatever the council thinks.
Councilmember Toll and then Councilmember Stewart.
I would also like to volunteer, throw my hat in, as Zach said, to be part of that planning. And I think starting by reviewing what we've already done, the work that's already done, is a great place to start.
Councilmember Stewart.
You might want to wait until after the elections to appoint anybody. Zachary and Lisa's not running this time, I don't guess. So, but if a third person who has to run wants on there, you might want to wait till after April to appoint somebody.
Councilmember DeLong and then Councilmember Smith.
I was just going to throw my name in too. I would volunteer.
Councilmember Smith.
To Rick's point, we have, I believe, 3 council members. No, never mind. That's wrong. We only have 2 that are guaranteed moving forward, both of whom have thrown their names in. And I would support Bryant's volunteer. I'm just curious what happens, because he will not be a council member come hell or high water after this election. Would he have to be replaced on the work group, or how's that look?
I think that would be up to you. If you appointed an individual and wish that individual to continue serving, I think that's up to the council.
Would that be up to this council right now? Could we go ahead and say that?
Yes, sir. I think so.
Let's do that. I would nominate those 3, and that Bryant stays on regardless of the outcome of the election. That's my motion.
Second.
Do I need to restate that, Eric?
No, I think we understand. The Councilmember Smith is nominating Councilmembers Toll, DeLong, and Clevenger. Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion?
Councilmember, I'm sorry. Councilmember Farr?
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong?
Yes.
Councilmember Saper?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Sorry, Tony, I didn't see you down there in the corner. You're off the screen. You will also be on. Yes.
Councilmember Tull?
Yes.
Councilmember Clevenger?
Yes.
Councilmember Stewart?
Sure, and good luck to them.
Councilmember Clark?
Yes.
8-0, motion carried. Number 21, Screenland Armor Outdoor Movie Short-Term Conditional Use Permit.
Thank you. I'll call on Ms. Copeland.
This item is a 2021 renewal of the movie event that Screenland Armor held in the latter part of 2020. They would like to begin holding these movies again on Fridays and Saturday nights, beginning on May 1 and running through November 1. These, again, would be weather dependent, so may not occur every weekend. They're requesting the short-term conditional use permit to start at 5 p.m. and run until 11 p.m.
Move to approve.
Councilmember Saper?
These have been very good projects that they've done there, movies, but it was originally put forward as a COVID emergency project. And this goes through November, which seems to me just too long a time frame. We don't know what the situation will be in July even. So I would really be in favor of a much shorter time frame.
Councilmember Clark and then Councilmember Smith.
I see your point, Tony, but I think what immediately comes to mind for me is all the loss of money that they've suffered in this last year. And this is one tiny effort to try to recoup that. That, you know, just because we start to maybe hopefully get back to normal by midsummer, let's hope, doesn't mean they're not still losing the money throughout last year and into this year that they're trying to recoup, is my thought on it.
Councilmember Smith?
Yeah,
Councilmember DeLong and then Clevenger.
Yeah, and I see Mr. Roberts is here and he's got his hand up, so we'll hear from him as well, I guess. But this seems like it's been an overwhelmingly positive response from the community on this, COVID or not. This seems like something that really doesn't hurt anything. The residents have been in favor of it, even the ones nearby. I see no problem with this persisting forward. Obviously, we need to approve it on a rolling basis, but this is something that I think is great long term.
Well, I raised my hand because I saw that the applicant also was on with his hand up. But you know, I've only received one complaint and it was quickly rectified. So, you know, I feel confident in their ability to, you know, to operate back here and not disturb the neighborhood.
Councilmember Clevenger and then perhaps Mr. Roberts.
Yeah, that's fine. I was just going to voice support of it if the council members in the district have not heard any complaints. This is, like Amy said, another avenue of revenue for them. I mean, I'm sure the lot's not being really used a lot on the weekends anyway, since it's right behind there, unless it's people that are going to the theater. So, I mean, it's a mainstay. It's one of our gyms in North Kansas City. Let's do all we can to support it.
Mr. Roberts, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I was just going to answer Councilmember Saper's comment about the long-term use of this. The movie industry right now is projecting 22 to actually be, and this is spring to summer 22 before 2019 numbers begin to return. In 2020, we lost 76% of our total revenues. And with the outdoor movies, we were able to, they accounted for 60% of our overall revenue, what we were able to make. Right now, of course, you know, this is actually worse than it was last year for us. So we don't really see any real relief come until probably the summer when vaccines are more widespread. But long-term as an industry, just like concerts, we're really looking towards 2022. And then Councilmember Smith, he brings a good point. I think for us, we didn't expect the community to be so involved with it. Seeing people walk down the street from their houses was a really, really fun thing, I think. And it really shined a light on how strong our community is and how many people actually come from just down the street as a whole family to do something safe and for the community. And it was a great, I think, experience for people to come to the movies, maybe for the first time, or to enjoy something outside. So if you guys have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Any other discussion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Councilmember Farr,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong,
Yes.
Councilmember Saper,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Tull,
Yes.
Councilmember Clevenger,
Absolutely.
Councilmember Stewart,
Yes.
and Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
8-0, motion carried. Number 22, process for discussion of development in North Kansas City.
Thank you. At the City Council meeting of January 19th, Councilmember Smith noted that a recent economic development incentive application, which is now gone by the wayside, had caused a lot of community discussion on the subject of development in the city and the city's role in it. And he suggested a public discussion on the topic. Councilmember Smith suggested a work session. We've talked about it quite a bit at staff level. We're somewhat doubtful that a discussion of such a broad topic and deep topic could be addressed in a single 1-hour work session prior to a council meeting. So we have suggested to you a multi-session process for your consideration. Our thought would be that perhaps the first work session might focus on reviewing the North Kansas City Master Plan that was adopted in 2016. The second work session might review the city's current development process, the city's economic development tools, and our economic development incentive policy. And then, having had that basis, then there might be a third session that would be scheduled for open discussion. Those are our thoughts, but we now seek your guidance as to how you'd like to conduct such a discussion. Councilmember Smith and then Councilmember Tull.
Couple things. So I like the proposal. I think getting a good depth of background is important. Since the first two are proposed to be largely informational, I'm just wondering if there's a better way to do that than to have, what would essentially be in a lecture. I'm sure there could be some questions back and forth, but if it could be, information disseminated with some staff commentary and we could read through it rather than, hosting two separate work sessions. And then the third piece, the discussion is important, but I really want a public aspect to that discussion, given that making all this information known and what incentives we have available, what our goals are as a council, and then find out, hey, what are the goals of the public? What are they looking for? And have that some way. I don't know what it looks like on Zoom at this point, but have a way we could get that public feedback in. So I think it would have to be on an actual council agenda with an open portion to have the public comment on that. Those could
also be done as a special council meeting.
Okay.
Where we would, perhaps use the raise hand feature or something. Councilmember Tull.
I was just going to say, I think you're right. It does need to be broken down into chunks like that. So I think that part of the plan is really good. And having the feedback from people who live here, people who work here, people who own businesses here, I think that would all be good. What Jesse was saying, that we could have the back and forth.
Yeah.
Mayor Stilo.
How are you going to do that? Is that going to be a virtual meeting or?
Until the council tells us otherwise, I guess we are meeting virtually. Yes, sir. So I think our suggestion might be, say have a special meeting where the public is invited to come in and use the raise hand feature in the same way that comments from the public is done now, to perhaps make comments. That we might design it something like that. One quick comment in response that I just make to Councilmember Smith, which is, I understand what you're saying about the first two sessions we proposed. Inevitably, we do think there'd probably be discussion back and forth on it, that it wouldn't just be staff. quote unquote lecturing the council, but that would be my only comment about that. Any Councilmember Smith?
So the master plan was developed in 2016. How often are master plans developed or turned over in the history of Northtown?
Sarah, can you speak to that?
So when we adopted the new master plan it was mostly developed in 2015. We were updating a plan that had been adopted in 2003 and then updated a bit in 2008. So at that time it was, about 12 years old. Usually your master plan, you want to change it, you want to at least dust it off some cities do it every year, but I would say at least every 5 years or so. So we're due probably to do a little dusting off, but it's probably still, without any radical changes, I would say I would expect it to have at least another 5 more years of life in it before I would expect for us to re-engage in a broader planning discussion about a new plan.
Okay, thank you.
So does council have any other thoughts? Does what we proposed sound like something you'd like us to follow, generally speaking? And then the other point was that we would assume you'd want to wait until after the election to commence that discussion.
Yeah, if the third session, sorry, I didn't raise my hand. If the third session was more of an open meeting, I'm generally in agreement with that. The whole part of holding it after the election, I understand the reasoning for it, because we're going to have people on at least for a year that would be involved with it. But if we hold anything that is brought up from, I don't know, January through April in anticipation of the next election, like we cycle elections, there's a new one every year. So I don't know that we necessarily need to hold the first informational sessions off because those candidates can tune in if they'd like. But that's my thought on it. I think we can go ahead and get the ball rolling.
And Sarah and I have spoken, and I think she could, engage in a review of the master plan on a relatively short time frame. So we can do that. Councilmember Saper?
Yeah, I agree with Councilmember Smith that we should go ahead and get it going now. And it's an important discussion to have.
Is there anything else? Otherwise, all right, we will work on getting before you that first work session that we talked about, and then we can proceed from there. If there's nothing else, I guess we can go ahead and move on to the next item.
23, proposed sidewalk on Fayette between 26th and 27th, resolution number 21-009.
Thank you. Councilmember Saper has composed a resolution for council consideration supporting the construction of a sidewalk on the west side of Fayette Street between 26th Avenue and 27th Avenue. Councilmember Saper has submitted in his resolution that the city seek bids for this project. Staff would suggest alternatively that the city's concrete contractor, who's chosen on the basis of competitive bidding and did supply the estimate for this work, perform the work. We budget about close to $300,000 a year for miscellaneous concrete work through our contractor for sidewalk replacement, curb and gutter, etc. So we would propose that we use that contractor that we have on board. If such a small project was to be bid out separately, it would almost certainly result in a higher cost for the work. So from our point of view, we would ask for your direction to proceed, and then the other question we would ask for is, would you like to amend the budget to do it this fiscal year or wait until next fiscal year? And of course, we can have the discussion about bidding the work out separately as well. Councilmember Smith and then Councilmember Clevenger.
So just so I'm understanding correctly, this is the west side of Fayette. The original rendering I saw, I believe, was on the east side. And the reason I bring that up is because I have a chunk of that east side of Fayette. So when it was proposed on that side, I was curious as to what the conversation is with the property owner, if any at all is required. And since it's on the west side, have we had those discussions with the property owners there, or is it just the city slaps a sidewalk in their yard? I do know it would cross a couple driveways, and there's a giant tree right where I think it would go. So what that looks like, is there going to be a tree taken out? And, do we have to compensate property owners or anything like that?
So I'll turn it over to Councilmember Saper to discuss any discussion he's had with the residents. Staff has not had any discussion with the residents. No compensation would be needed. This is in right of way. Whether it was a sidewalk was constructed on the east side or the west side, a tree would need to be taken out. So there is a tree that would need to be taken out as part of this project, and we have included the estimated cost of that removal in our estimate for this project. Councilmember Saper, did you want to discuss any discussion?
Yeah, the residents on the west side have indicated they could live with it, but would prefer that it not be there because of the concerns with driveway. That's the east side. On the west side, they're either in favor of it or don't care, neutral.
Councilmember Smith, and I know Councilmember Clevenger, you also wanted to speak, but
I just have a response to that question. I can appreciate that you asked the residents there. I'm not sure if you're frozen, Councilmember Saper. Looks to be frozen.
I believe he is.
So if anybody can answer this, I know that he said he spoke to the residents. Has anybody spoken to the owners of those properties? Because I believe that they're all owned and leased. So I didn't know if the owner would have any input, or I hear it's city right of way. So, but those driveways are fairly short. I don't know if people park in the driveway and would then be parking across the sidewalk. That could become a problem.
I believe, and Pat Hover, you might speak.
Apparently that is not a problem on the west side.
And I believe, just in answer to your question, Councilmember Smith, and then I'll call on Councilmember Clevenger, and Pat Hover, you might jump in, but Pat happened to see one resident out there, and I can't remember which side of the street it was on, who did indicate that they park in the driveway and that it might cause their car to poke over the sidewalk if we were to construct a sidewalk there. Councilmember Clevenger?
Couple of quick questions. So the people that are we're looking on the west side for building the sidewalk, and most of the people are in favor or neutral of that. Do we know why a sidewalk wasn't built there before? Was it just the construction of the driveways and the tree that was there? Or do we have any idea why one wasn't constructed there in the first place?
I don't think so, sir. It's not. It's an old neighborhood, and for whatever reason, it just didn't happen.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm all about pedestrian and safety, and I mean, the only question I have is, I mean, if the cars or trucks are going to be blocking the driveway, but then, like it happens on the avenue, some people have to park on the street. So I thank Councilmember Saper for bringing it forward.
Councilmember DeLong.
What I was going to add is, as you walk around town, we filled sidewalk in most residential areas, and this is definitely one of the gaps that's still open in the remaining. I mean, neither side of the sheet right here has anything. So definitely in support of putting something there. I do think we want to make sure we reach out to the homeowner probably as well. These trees provide shade, and I don't know if I'd be afraid you take a tree out from a homeowner. I don't know. Are those both rentals on that side? Do we know? On the west side?
Yeah.
West side. They both. I mean, it might be a thing where you're asked the longer term owner, to make sure they're okay with that. I guess I'm not really I don't know, sun and shade expert, but I just want to make sure you're not cutting something down on somebody. Is it possible that we work around the tree, or is there not just?
That would be a problem. We would need to acquire additional right of way, and it's just not recommended to construct sidewalks in that manner.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, if everyone's okay with it, I'm okay with moving forward on this. That's it.
So I guess a couple of questions. If assuming you elect to move forward, shall we use I'm sorry, Councilmember Stewart, did you have a question?
Yeah, well, not so much a question, it is an opinion. I love sidewalks, and I think they ought to be everywhere. but not if you're going to park across them with no way around it. You know, you can get a ticket for doing that actually in North Kansas City. And then if you take the parking away from the person, they may not want the sidewalk anymore. But there's no point in building a sidewalk if you're guaranteed you're going to block
it. Councilmember Saper.
Yeah, you're right, Rick. But the people on the west side actually are either supportive or neutral. It was the people on the east side who had problems with that.
Well, they may not care, Anthony, but if they're going to block the sidewalk, you know, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, they may say, yeah, put the sidewalk here. I don't mind, but I'm going to park across it.
That's apparently not a problem for them.
What? Parking across it is not a problem? Well, it is for everybody walking.
Yeah.
I know, no. They had no problem they weren't using the driveway for parking.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. Yeah.
Councilmember Toll and then Councilmember Smith.
I think maybe your computer froze, Tony, when Jesse was talking, but the only thing I can see that could be a backlash, it's not my area. So what you guys want to do, the neighbors in that neighborhood are great, but there'll be property owners and renters, and those are mature trees coming from a neighborhood that has baby trees. I might be really upset if a mature tree got taken out of my lot. So I just don't want anyone coming back and being like, how could you take out that tree? It's, you know, that's the only thing I could think of. And I think maybe you missed Jesse just because your computer froze.
Councilmember Smith and then Mayor Stilo.
Yeah, so I spend a lot of time in this area. I do own the property across the street, and the people who live on the corner of Fayette and 27th definitely park in that driveway, and they would be very likely across the sidewalk. With all that said, I do like the idea of a sidewalk, but speaking as somebody who owns the adjacent property, if this proposal was on the east side, I wouldn't be a big fan of it because it would take out a giant tree that shades the house I own. It's a tough one because this is, you know, pedestrian access is important. I walk the street all the time, and we just walk in the street. It's not been a problem. But taking out those trees, that's got to be something the owner signs off on. Those are pretty significant assets to those owners. So if we're going to go west side, I say we have to have those discussions with the owner.
If you like, staff can reach out to the people who are the owners of record and try to get some kind of an opinion from them.
They should be in the rental property registry.
Yes. Mayor Stilo and then Councilmember Farr.
Yeah, really, that's what I was going to recommend. And I think we need to go back and talk to the property owners and everything else before we jump in and you know, and staff needs to go down there and take a look at it and see what they think. So I would just as soon let this thing kind of table until we find out more information.
I can tell you the staff has looked at it, and the only, you know, we did indicate to Councilmember Saper, our only real thought was that either side you'd have to remove a mature tree, whichever side was chosen. But other than that, we don't see any issues with building the sidewalk if that's what council wants to do. Councilmember Farr?
I'm concerned about the mature tree. I mean, I have them all around my house, and I survive in the summertime because of them. If the city came in and cut one of my trees down, I would be very upset. And number two, if you're going to reach out to them, I would tell them that if they're rentees or whatever park across the sidewalk, they're going to get a ticket, period.
Councilmember Saper.
Just to be clear, the tree is one on each side, so we're only talking about one tree, is in the public right of way. It's not on a property owner's land at all.
Would council like us to approach property owners, get any input from them and bring this back?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, if that's okay, then we'll just proceed based upon that consensus. So we can proceed to the next item. Thank you.
Number 24. Employment agreement with City Councilor Thomas E. Barzee Jr. Bill number 7577, ordinance number 9374.
First reading.
Second.
Councilmember Farr,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong,
Yes.
Councilmember Saper,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Tull,
Yes.
Councilmember Clevenger,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
An ordinance approving and adopting 8th Amendment addenda to employment agreement by and between the City of North Kansas City, Missouri and Thomas E. Barzee Jr., City Councilor.
I move that bill number 7577 be placed on second and final reading and passes ordinance number 9374.
Second.
Councilmember Farr,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong,
Yes.
Councilmember Saper,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Tull,
Yes.
Councilmember Clevenger,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
8-0, motion carried. An ordinance approving and adopting 8th Amendment addenda to employment agreement by and between the City of North Kansas City, Missouri and Thomas E. Barzee Jr., City Councilor. Number 25, approving accounts due and payable by the city through February 12th, 2021. Bill number 7583, ordinance number 9380.
First reading.
Second.
Councilmember Farr,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong,
Yes.
Councilmember Saper,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Tull,
Yes.
Councilmember Clevenger,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
8-0, motion carried. An ordinance authorizing payment for certain accounts due and payable by the city through February 12th, 2021.
I move the bill number 7583 be placed on second and final reading and passes ordinance number 9380.
Second.
Councilmember Farr,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong,
Yes.
Councilmember Saper,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Tull,
Yes.
Councilmember Clevenger,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
8-0, motion carried. An ordinance authorizing payment for certain accounts due and payable by the city through February 12th, 2021.
Thank you. Next item is staff comments. We have 3 written reports in your packet. Otherwise, staff has no comments tonight. Next item is council member comments. We'll begin with council member Farr.
I just want to commend the city services, keeping our streets up. Did a wonderful job, have no complaints. It's been cold out. Please check on your neighbors, check on your loved ones, your dogs, anything else that's outside, because it's been brutal these past few days. Hopefully it's going to clear up for us. That's it.
Councilmember DeLong.
I've already brought this up with staff, but I want to bring to everyone else's attention. I asked them to look at coming up with a more comprehensive emergency management plan on handling extreme cold conditions. Because, there's something that came up over the last several days is, if someone didn't have powers or, someone that was homeless, how do you make sure they don't freeze to death on our streets? So I brought that up because I don't think that's currently in it's not even on the state's emergency management site that I could find. So I did bring that to their attention, and, also want to thank staff for coming together to finding a solution over the last several days to help some of the people that have fallen through other safety nets. So I appreciate staff's work, and as well as our residents who brought the need for that to our attention. Beyond that, we're learning a lot about a lot of things, including the Southwest Power Pool. I think everyone kind of learned about that today over the last couple of days. About an hour ago, they did issue level 2 again, which is asking its member companies to issue public conservation appeals. So conserve your electricity, and hopefully we don't have to continue through some of these rolling blackouts in the next few days. So that's all I have tonight. Thank you.
Councilmember Saper.
With the cold and COVID and doom and gloom that seems to be all around us sometimes, it's nice to know that actually there's a bright spot that's emerged today. Pitchers and catchers are reporting to spring training camp.
Councilmember Smith.
Amen to that. So I don't know about everybody else. I'm a little sick of living in unprecedented times. We've had an unprecedented run of cold weather, as everybody knows, and I'm not sure who's watching this or who needs to hear it, but keep those pipes dripping. As some of you know, I had a plumbing emergency at a home I own right as this meeting was getting started. It's not fun when it happens, so keep those pipes moving. Again, like Tom said, I want to commend the public services keeping the roads clear. And like Bryant brought up, city staff and concerned residents doing a lot of good behind the scenes that most people will never hear about. So thank you for your efforts. They're not overlooked. So thanks for doing what you're doing.
Councilmember Tull.
Yes. I want to thank Cerner and North Kansas City Hospital. I've heard nothing but good things in the program they're running, and everybody is so very thankful to have them. I also want to thank the city staff and Chief Freeman. He was extremely flexible and willing to serve the community, offering a warming space for people to go to. And I just really appreciate having that because it's deadly cold. So I appreciate that. And then also Tom Barzee for all of your work on the 18th and Swift and taking the time out to discuss some things with me as well. I appreciate you. And yeah, still masking up for a while. Come on, 1C.
Councilmember Clevenger.
Couple of things. First of all, congrats to the YMCA making money this last year, even during the COVID. Look for great things to come with that. Also want to echo Tom's and the others' comments about the city crews and the snow plows, keeping the city streets clean. Also echo on staff and members of our community that have worked on those warming shelters, either here in town or down at Bartle Hall. So you guys have done a great job on that, and thanks for your work on that. And I also want to just echo and thank our admins for the North Kansas City Neighbors page for keeping that site clean and mean. So thank you for doing that, admins. And that's all I've got tonight.
That's Member Stewart.
Okay. The city crew's done about the best you can do. You know that you can get so cold as we did that the stuff doesn't melt with the chemicals on it. We were colder today than Fairbanks, Alaska by a few degrees. And a plumber told me once, and I think I found out once by error, is like Jesse said on leaving the water, you got to have, dripping ain't going to do it. You need to have a fine line, but the diameter of a lead pencil, the lead in the pencil, not the whole pencil, but it has to be a straight stream to pull, move water through the pipes. That's what a plumber said. I don't know. So now I leave a straight line, even though my basement's heated, and it has to be a break outside to get me, I think. But it's terrible. I just wanted to find out, did we have to take anybody in on the cold places? Was it?
We did several people. We did transport to a shelter.
Okay, that's excellent. The thought of somebody freezing, even frostbite or freezing to death. I feel sorry for the animals even that can't come in. The wild animals, but to have a person when we had the ability to help them, it makes me feel good that we did. Cerner, my goodness, I think I sent you all an email. I took Marilyn up there. There was nobody waiting outside there. You got an appointment, you got indoors out of the weather. Everybody had a smile on their face up there. And can I help you do this? Can I help you do that? And Marilyn says she's seen the fire chief up there. He was working too. So I hope they keep it up. She's got to go back for number 2 in March the 4th, I think. And so they did a great job, and that's about it for me. Thank you.
Councilmember Clark.
Yeah, just echoing everybody. I'm really proud of our community for coming together for the warming center, for exporting people to warming centers. I'll be volunteering at the Scott Ike Warming Center downtown tomorrow. I know Mindy Hart collected a bunch of donations. There's still donation opportunities. If you want to send them my way, I'll be taking bags tomorrow. Great use of social media and connecting, you know, and the council members that were able to get directly involved. And I too, Rick, have heard really good things from my neighborhood on the Cerner setup and their experience when they go in. It just, you never heard of people being excited to get a vaccine until now. So yeah, it's good stuff. And then to emphasize for everyone watching, for the two people, it's cold water drip. Make sure we remind everybody, because I've had a couple friends that said, hey, I had it running. I had the hot water running like the whole time and that didn't help. And I had to help do a hairdryer moment that luckily worked out. We didn't bust any pipes, but yes, cold water drip or straight line as Rick has pointed out. That's it for me.
And Mayor Steele.
Stay warm. I'm done.
Number 29, consideration of a request to hold and recess into an executive session as requested by the city councilor to be held on this date on a litigation matter pursuant to Missouri Revised Statute section 610.0211.
So moved.
Second.
Councilmember Farr?
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong?
Yes.
Councilmember Saper?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Tull?
Yes.
Councilmember Clevenger?
Yes.
Councilmember Stewart?
Yes.
Councilmember Clark?
Yes.
Well, I made it through it.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Yeah,
Aye.
yeah. Aye.
See ya.
Thank you, everybody.